to record. Yeah, so we do quite a bit of research at the first level. Number one is doing research that allows ESOs such as yourselves to make better and informed decisions. We also do quite a bit of research that focuses outward in terms of policy. So one of the things that you realize in Kenya is, SMEs and entrepreneurs are really trying very hard to be able to, successfully run their ventures. But you find that they face systemic challenges. So by systemic challenges, these are challenges that are beyond their control. And mostly these challenges emanate from either suboptimal or ineffective a policy environment. So we try to be able to do research around these areas that allows policy organs to be able to, again, institute or, align policies to the reality of entrepreneurs in Kenya as well as in the region. So probably I can just allow, maybe we can just go around. Here I have my colleague Sheila. Then probably we can just proceed from there. Karibu Sheila. Sheila, are you there? If not, then probably.
Yeah.
Hi.
Sorry, my name is Sheila Birgen. I am an ecosystem builder. I run Innovation Code, and also I'm the country lead for KTN, Innovate UK KTN. And yeah, I'm excited to be part of this conversation.
Thank you, Sheila. We're also co-hosting this session with Sheila. Maybe Derek?
Yep, I'm here.
Good morning, everybody.
Yeah.
Sorry, did you want me to go ahead, Victor?
Yeah, probably we can just go Derek, then we come to you, Eric. Sorry.
Okay, all right. So my name is Derek Banga, and I wear a number of hats, but for purposes of this conversation today, I am with the Global Chamber Nairobi. The Global Chamber is part of a Global Chamber Nairobi, I should say, is part of an international organization which is set up to sort of accelerate cross-border business, trade and investment. And we do this by bringing together CEOs or business owners and leaders through what we call warm connections, and just through events try to facilitate their being able to do business together. And I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Derek. Eric, now you can proceed.
Sorry, I think when I had Derek, I had Eric in the background. Common mistake. Good morning, everybody. My name is Eric Mudoga. I work for an organization called Ict, and basically I am the country lead for a program that is called the Africa Berlin Network, and which actually forms a collective platform that brings together communities with within the startup ecosystems across Africa and Berlin. And the whole purpose of it is to enable relationship building among investors, startups, bridge builders, through different things, workshops, events, delegation trips. And the whole intention is to support the startups in international expansion, and to bring together business leaders, institutions, accelerators, experts, innovators, just open new doors to actually bring vibrancy to any ecosystem within the network. And I'm very happy to be part of this call.
Karibu sana, Eric. Maybe we can move to Hilda.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Hilda Ogada from Kenya Export Promotion and Branding Agency. I look after the US market. Thank you.
Karibu sana, Hilda. Nuba?
Hello, hi. My network, I'm on the road, so my network isn't great. I was just going to type in the chat, just in case it goes on and off, unless you can hear me right now.
Yeah, we can hear you.
You can? Okay, fantastic. Again, my name is Nuba. I work for a tea company. We are in the business of value addition, and we produce a variety of iced teas. I work as a business development consultant. And I'm excited to be here. I was very interested in this session and the topic. So yeah, I look forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nuba. Pat, you can see you sneaked in.
Hi, everybody. I'm Patricia Okello from Kayana. I'm en route, so you might hear some noises in the background. But Kayana created a community of female entrepreneurs that comes together to support each other to grow our businesses through networking, peer-to-peer learning, sharing. We basically do this through various interventions, including workshops, masterclasses, and business visits as well. And I'm really excited to be on this call and to listen to the insight. Thanks.
Thanks, Pat. Cynthia?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Cynthia from Wild International, and I'm glad to be here. So I'll just give you a brief about Wild International. It's a management consulting firm. We've been in existence for the last 15 years, and we work with entrepreneurs, and we also work with entrepreneur support organizations. Yes, and looking forward to very insightful session ahead.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. So the way we structured this session was to be quite brief and concise in terms of just trying to explore the issue around trade. If you notice that, I think since the CFTA kicked in, one of our strategic direction was to be able to unpack knowledge around trade. Either CFTA, COMESA, EAC, and I think this particular conversation between Kenya and the US through the Strategic Trade and Investment Partnership forms within the ambit of this, and it allows us to be able to query what is happening and probably be able to inform small medium enterprises of the opportunities that lie there. And the reason why we've decided to actively pursue this trajectory is because we realize that if you look at the lobby structure of Kenya, is we have at the top level, you have your KEPSAs, you have your KNCCA, you have your CAM, which play a very instrumental role in terms of shaping policy conversations in the country. But if you look again in retrospect, the last 10 years or so, we see a lot of intervention. We see a lot of things happening within the entrepreneurship space, but there is some level of mismatch in terms of intervention vis-a-vis the reality of SMEs. For instance, if you look at the CFTA, for instance, there is mention of women and youth as well as SMEs as a core within the framework. But if you again go towards your typical SME, your typical entrepreneur, chances are there is some either misinformation, asymmetry of sorts, or they are not even aware that such a thing happens. And even to add, salt to a wound, is that probably they don't know how to engage. So we hope that platforms such as this can form a basis to bring different actors and just have open conversations around possibilities and see what comes out of this. So I'll do a quick, just a quick presentation, a quick introduction in terms of what is the Strategic Trade and Investment Partnership. We are glad that we have a representative from government, I think. Probably you can be able to shed more light in case maybe data is not accurate or is not up to date. Probably after that, then probably I can just open it up for just a bit of banter, of conversation. Probably then this can help us in terms of drafting a position paper around this based on conversations that we've had with different stakeholders. So allow me to start. Maybe just to give us just a quick background. In terms of session flow, as I mentioned, is just what is this strategic trade investment partnership? What is it about? What is the state of play or in terms of trade between Kenya and US? We just did a bit of literature review just to see what has transpired prior to 2022. What does trade look like? How much is being exported from US to Kenya? What kind of goods are being traded? And of course, this forms a good market intelligence for a lot of businesses. So, probably they can be able to know where where opportunities lie currently. How can we be able to maybe grow the market share that we currently have, as well as if there are any new opportunities in terms of products that probably can be exported and probably would allow for businesses to grow. As I think one of our colleagues was mentioning, she does tea. Probably is this an opportunity for, are there opportunities for her to be able to export tea other than the way we currently do in terms of unprocessed tea and coffee? We look at the state of play in terms of issues that Kenyan, in terms of issues around Kenyan, or the pain points that Kenya has. For any strategy or for any negotiation, it has to be anchored on a strategy of sorts. So what we've done is we've been able to look in retrospect on Kenyan issues as documented by strategic plans, strategic documents of Kenya. Looking at the industrial policies, looking at looking at Vision 2030, and all these documents that government has been able to produce that is aimed at supporting SMEs and other entrepreneurs in Kenya, and trying to see if there's a gap that can be addressed with this framework called STEEP. That's the approach that we propose. Again, we are open to different perspectives. It's just our interpretation of, if you're going to negotiate with the US, then probably you need to be able to identify your pain points very clearly, and as you go on the table, then probably use that as a basis for for negotiations. Again, it's still very open. It's still early days for this, and we hope that this can form part of that conversation. Yeah, so I think, as you are all aware, Kenya and the US, through the different concerned ministries. For Kenya is the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Enterprise Development, together with the Office of the United States Trade Representative, signed an MOU of sorts that is called the Strategic Investment Partnership, whose goal again is just to be able to explore areas of collaboration in terms of how can we be able to facilitate for the two economies to be able to interact, and focusing on a variety of issues. Of course, economic growth being at the core of it, looking at workers, looking at consumers, and looking at businesses, and specifically the micro, small, medium enterprises, which we know in Kenya is literally the backbone of the economy. I think the last report that we've seen from KNBS is that SMEs are around 98% of all registered businesses. They contribute around 33% to Kenya's GDP, employ close to, I think, over 30% of the population. I think around more than 80% of new jobs created within the economy is within the MSME space. Of course, Kenya is largely gray, in the sense that a lot of SMEs are, I think, around 70% are informal. So meaning that with that level of informality, chances of growth, opportunities for growth are limited. but it does not necessarily mean that we cannot be able to support them. So ideally is how can we be able, with the data that we know, with the reality that we have in terms of SMEs, how can we be able to use this platform of negotiation to allow them to be able to access that market, which of course would have a direct benefit to socioeconomic development. So under the strategic trade investment partnerships, they've identified 10 issues, agriculture, anti-corruption, digital trade, environment and climate action, regulatory practices, MSME, promoting workers' rights, youth, women, standards, as well as trade facilitation. So out of this, the way we thought about it is, can we be able to pick some of these issues that actually have a direct bearing to entrepreneurship in Kenya? And we picked, I think, around seven or eight out of 10. Climate action, again, the debate is out there, but we wanted things that really directly related to business or entrepreneurship in Kenya. So in terms of state of US-Kenya trade, of course, we've had a long-established diplomatic relationship between the two countries, going back as far as 1992. But in terms of milestone, or in terms of highlight, in 2018, 2019, Kenya signed a bilateral strategic dialogue conversation in 2019. And again, this was a precursor to the current framework that they want to develop. And again, this was based on at least 5 pillars: economic prosperity, defense, democracy, multilateral and regional issues, as well as public health. My concern again, or our concern again, just focuses on economic prosperity and looking at the opportunities that lie within that particular pillar. So in terms of trade specifically, Kenya continues to trade with the US through 3 different channels. The first one is the African Growth Opportunities Act, where Kenya gets some trade preferences or preferential treatment, with most of us knowing textile and apparels as a major beneficiary. And of course, if you look at economic statistics, we see manufacturing and textile industry really being up there in terms of contributing towards socioeconomic development. We have broader conversations or broader trade happening within the EAC under the Trade Investment Framework Agreement, TIFA, as well as the US, Kenya trading through the COMESA platform. So I think even as we were writing this report, the question we were asking at this level is there coherency for Kenya as we trade through these 3 trading platforms? Are they random? Are they coherent? Is there a deliberate strategy around the same? Again, we've not done a deep dive to just be able to see that, but at least what we know is Kenya is able to trade through these 3 platforms. So currently Kenya is US 96th largest trading partner. Again, this is just looking at both import as well as export. We also see in US invest through foreign direct investment around 353 million US dollars as of 2019. The way this FDI is distributed, again, we don't have visibility of that data, but at least we know at top level or in aggregate, that's what we are looking at. So currently, again, we are looking at trade through these 3 platforms, and I think this the strategic trade investment partnership is looking at maybe adding to AGOA or being an improvement to AGOA, and I think it has been touted as a proposed model that maybe the US can adopt as it seeks to trade with other African countries. So in terms of exports, this basically, again, is a quick snapshot in terms of what US exports to Kenya. We see, of course, aircraft, plastic, machinery, etc. And what is of interest, you can see there is cereals, which is wheat. Which brings the question of our policy really working. So if you look at, Kenya's industrial policy, Kenya industrial policy for, I think, 2016, 2012, the idea was to be able to support local industry through, import substitution. So things that can be produced in Kenya, is there a way, can we be able to support our local entrepreneurs, whether in agriculture or manufacturing, to be able to produce some of these things since we're importing? So that again is something we are grappling even right now, as as the war between Russia and Ukraine surges, and of course, cost of wheat, fertilizer, as well as fuel goes up. So again, this is just data as it is. In terms of if you are to do a deep dive in agriculture, we see that Kenya was exporting, again, wheat, vegetable oil, pulses, coarse grain, and planting seeds, which again speaks to our agricultural sector, which is focused on cash crops. So if you look at, even the latest economic review by KNBS, we saw that, agriculture is a major contributor towards GDP, I think around 24% directly and another 24%, around 20% indirectly. But if you look at agriculture, agriculture is more of cash crop, your tea, your coffee, etc. So again, this presents an opportunity for Kenya in terms of being able to do some level of import substitution of sorts, just to ensure that at least we are food secure and we are able to produce our own food. Again, issues around that, maybe probably this can be something that is addressed as government goes to have those conversations, specifically looking at agriculture, because it's one of the issues that has been raised. In terms of detailed export, we can see, of course, there's a lot of machinery, which speaks to our, our local manufacturing. We still have a long way to go in terms of, being able to scale the manufacturing ladder and be able to be maybe a top tier manufacturer. But this is the current state in terms of exports from the US. So in terms of import from import to the US, which basically means that's export from Kenya. Again, if you look in terms of our top exports, we are looking at wood apparel, knitted apparel. Again, this, you can see this is very much tied to AGOA because there's a lot of textile trade happening. We have macadamia nuts. Again, that's not processed, titanium, coffee, tea, and spice. Again, we can see we are exporting, of course, within the AGOA framework. But other than that, we see, unprocessed products going to the US, which means that maybe we are not really getting full value for the products that we're exporting. So we see tree nuts, unroasted coffee, tea, essential oils, vegetable oils, etc. So again, this presents an opportunity for us to be able to negotiate, or it gives room for us to be able to negotiate, maybe being able to export value added. And for year in, year out, we keep on seeing that, we are top producer of coffee, we produce the best coffee, we produce the best tea, and all these products, but it's still raw. And of course, this challenge is not only for Kenya, is also something that the Continental Free Trade Area is grappling with. If you look at the import products that are coming to Africa is largely processed products, while Africa, and Kenya exports raw products. So that's the state of play in terms of trade. In terms of beef, as we go towards looking for recommendations, you probably need to know where your pain points are. So it's just good to look in-house, introspect, and ask ourselves, what really are the challenges that are facing the different issues that have been raised, which would form the basis for us to negotiate. So we condense that into four: MSME, digital economy, agriculture, and regulation. And the idea around this is just to take stock of who SMEs are, what kind of policies are there, what are we trying to achieve, looking at the different aspects. So once you're able to understand that, then probably you can be able to give proper recommendations. They say a problem that is well defined is almost getting half the solution. So the sooner we're able to define our challenges and know where the gaps are, then probably we can be able to use that as a basis for negotiation. So of course, looking I'm sure probably most of you are familiar with the term SME. So these are micro, small enterprises. In the words that used interchangeably, micro, small enterprises, as well as SMEs, which is the small, medium enterprises. I think a lot of us use that interchangeably, but the terms started almost 50 years ago as defined by a report by ILO, Employment Incomes Equity. Again, it was just looking at the Kenyan economy broadly, and they realized that there is a sector that is quite informal. And they came up with a definition around SMEs, and even I think they went as far ahead as to define Juakali, which basically means SMEs that are operating within the informal sector. But over the years, we've been able to craft policies and legal frameworks that can be able to support SMEs. The first one being the Msme Act 2012, which literally went ahead to define who SMEs are. And if you look at the Act, we see SMEs being defined based on turnover, number of employees, etc. We have Vision 2030 again, which under the economic pillar, there is a myriad of strategies that were put to ensure that SMEs are able to thrive. And subsequent government have been able to unpack that through the different medium-term plans. And we've seen, I think, the last one being MTP3 under Big Four. We saw a lot of push or strategies or formulation around SMEs, whether it's through the COVID-19 economic stimulus program or the economic recovery strategy. Again, SMEs were at the center of it. So whether whether the strategies have been effective or not, again, the jury is still out there. So in 2020, again, the Ministry of Trade, Industry, and came up with an MSME policy, again, just trying to bring together all the issues that have been affecting SMEs and all policy interventions into one vehicle. So again, probably either through this session or even after this session, we may need to be able to just really go do a deep dive to the MSME policy and see where the gaps are and try to connect the challenges that have been identified through this policy, as well as other government research, as well as other development partners research, trying to unpack these challenges, see how probably this negotiation or this conversation that Kenya is going to have with the US can be able to alleviate some of the challenges. But just to give you a gist in terms of challenges, and this is based on 2016 KNBS report. Again, this is a challenge because we are in 2020, but we are referencing a 2016 report. And again, for us, I think in different platforms, we've tried to encourage governments to be able to update data, because you can't use maybe data that is 5 years old to do interventions today. So this is still a challenge. And I think, again, it's still a challenge, but we've seen, again, same government make efforts towards updating. Currently, we have, I think Makueni and Laikipia having updated their county abstract. So if you go to these two counties, you'd find that they have very up-to-date data in terms of the state of play of businesses within the counties. So it's easier for them to be able to propose interventions that have a high probability of, being able to work effectively. So these are basically challenges that SMEs face, and you can use this as part of your negotiations in terms of, let's say, for example, looking for markets. Markets is something that SMEs continue to grapple with, and if you look at even the different manifestos that are being put out there, you see conversations around the economy, but specifically conversations around supporting SMEs. There are issues around market, finance, regulation, competition, access to credit, as well as doing business within the counties. So that's the first issue in terms of SMEs. Again, is just identifying the challenges and using these challenges tabulating these challenges or enumerating these challenges in a manner that the US framework can be able to address. How that is done again is up to the creativity of the drafters of that framework. Again, agriculture again is the biggest employer in Kenya. It's been identified as an issue, and again, if you look at statistics, agriculture performs very well, but is highly skewed towards cash crops. If you look at your food crops, we still have challenges. Just quick literature review, we see that we have land and population pressure. So what is happening is, if you look at best practice in terms of agriculture, there is agriculture, it goes together with scale. So you can't maybe, for example, farming your 50 by 100, 10 of you, and try to export. You already are complicating your access to market, as opposed to maybe for example, someone in Brazil who's doing the same agriculture at a minimum of 1,000 acres. So we've consistently, again, due to urbanization and pressure, we've really the average farm size has been reducing over the years. We continue to invest very little in terms of research and development within the agricultural space. The extension services framework currently is suboptimal. Access to markets is a challenge for agriculture. And of course, there are various challenges around it. Number one being market intelligence, number two being regulation. So if you, for instance, look at cess as a tax, that in itself is an impediment to access to a market within Kenyan counties. So, for instance, if I want to transport maize that I've harvested in Kisumu and I want to bring maybe to Nairobi, and I'm bringing an entire canter, that cess is going to be levied across the different borders, county borders, and the formulas across the borders keep on changing. So you can see that that presents as a challenge. Access to credit is a challenge within the agricultural sector. If you look at data from central bank as well as KNBS, we see private sector investment in agriculture for the last decade has not gone more than 3%. So there is, and of course, banks, given that they're in business, are looking for getting the most return at the lowest risk. So if you look at the current state of agriculture, it's quite risky. So accessing credit becomes a challenge. Of course, we have climate change, which is a global issue, soil fertility and land degradation, as well as public expenditure within agriculture. So what we currently see, and of course this is a failure maybe either from the different arms of government, is the investment towards agriculture in terms of commitment at AU. Kenya has consistently been spent less within agriculture, and even where money is spent within agriculture, monitoring of that becomes a challenge. Because we see a lot of supplementary budgets being passed. So, like recently, we saw the Cabinet Secretary Treasury putting out a budget, but within a month we already are seeing supplementary budgets being passed. So whatever had been allocated to agriculture means that if that money is not spent within the area that it was allocated, then of course the entire sector is going to suffer. The other area is digital economy. And again, digital economy is not something that has been completely defined. Loosely, I think there is a question of what the contribution of ICT sector towards GDP. That's probably one way of understanding digital or internet-based economy. So there's no one definition of digital economy, but again, we just work based on the general agreed definition. So this definition is what Ministry of ICT are going with in terms of ICT sector contribution towards GDP. We know 7.1% is the contribution of the sector in Africa towards GDP. In Kenya, the ICT sector has been very vibrant. and of course it manifests in different forms. We have we have startups, we have hardcore ICT, we have innovation. All these fall within the digital economy. Again, as we go towards conversations with the US, I think we probably need to take stock, be able to unpack what digital economy looks like in Kenya. What are the challenges that they face? For example, if we have to just narrow down on startups, and maybe probably Sheila can maybe touch on that, is what are the challenges that are facing the startup ecosystem? How can we be able to plug in, or how can we be able to use this framework to allow startups to thrive? And of course, we have a myriad of policy interventions under the Ministry of ICT that talk about startups. And I think I was mentioning to Sheila, even before we started, is if you look at startups have been mentioned in 3 separate government documents. Number 1 being Vision 2030, number 2 being under the Ministry of Industry and Trade, and number 3 startups being mentioned in the Ministry of ICT. So the question is, why do we have 3 different documents targeting the same person? Why can't government, have one policy conversation towards startups? So it doesn't matter from which ministry this conversation is coming in, so that we reduce redundancy and wastage of resources around the same. So in terms of regulation, again, you've seen regulation feature as part of the 8 of the 10 issues. And for us, the focus was looking at the state of regulation as is. So and specifically looking at entrepreneurship. And the ministry that is charged with that, and I think even the Keproba and all these Msme are all within Ministry of Industry and Trade. It has had several policy pronouncements, which has led to different legislative interventions towards business. And again, it's just taking stock. We first have the National Industrial Policy 2012, whose focus generally was just looking at what we're calling import substitution. So like we've seen, we import wheat from US. How can we be able to support local industry to be able to get a share of that market? Because it means that there is demand, there is aggregate demand for this product. How can we be able to support that? Of course, this led to different interventions. So of course, you have a policy pronouncement which generally gives a guideline around what government intends to achieve, which then would trickle down to actual legislation, which now is almost like the action towards supporting the policy pronouncement. So we've had different legislation, like for example, the Msme Act 2012, which came as a direct precursor to the industrial policy. So we've had again different proposals under this. Some of them have been achieved, some have not been achieved. So one of the things I think that we've seen is for instance, if you look at the special economic zone, the 5 SME industrial parks. So this has not been achieved to date. So this, of course, is a gap that we can use as we go to negotiations. Can we be able to set up, for example, a special SME industrial park? And can we be able to link that to a specific market within the US? So for instance, under either, currently we have textile. Can we be able to identify another value chain and probably within the US, and can we be able to support establishment of these special economic zones for SMEs to be able to target? So that's the reason why, taking stock of the challenges that you face, or the landscape that you have, can be able to give you good raw materials for negotiations. So that's the first trade policy. The second was the Kenya National Trade Policy 2016. Again, due to maybe lessons or challenges of the first trade policy, it didn't work very well. So in 2016, again, government changed tact in terms of trade policy, because of course it's not easy just to say we will do import substitution, and say, okay, now we are going to remove wheat. The question is that data is aggregate. You can't. They would say that Kenya is importing wheat, but who exactly is importing? You'd find that it's not like normal, the general population that is consuming that. Probably it's a B2B kind of a market. and organizing small businesses to be able to satisfy maybe the demand for millers maybe proved to be a challenge. Again, that we had the trade policy, the first one, second one. Then we have what is called the MSME policy, again, focusing on SMEs. And again, the idea was just to be able to bring all this, because of course, even despite policy intervention, legislative intervention, SMEs have continued to suffer. So I think, again, government through Ministry of Industry and Trade, again, tried to do literature review, just combine all these interventions into one policy, just to be able to streamline everything, which brought the MSME Policy 2020. Again, this was just recently launched. And again, what I noted, or what we noted as we were going through the MSME policy again, is there is a mixture of issue. And one of the things that you notice, and I think I was mentioning to Sheila, is you find that under the MSME policy, we already have startups being mentioned. Again, if you look at the definition, technical definition, and even the business model of startups vis-a-vis SMEs, they are light and day. So the question is, why would government combine startups and SMEs within the same space? Of course, maybe in your own time, maybe probably you can just take a deep dive in terms of the objective of MSMEs. But as I said, you notice under Objective 6, we have facilitate startups. It's okay to have it there, but I think if you are to look again at best practice in terms of global best practice in terms of how different economies have been able to deal with startups, and for example, if you look at India, which is a very good reference point, they have been able to separate SMEs, and interventions within for SMEs have been quite different from startups. Even if they are to sit within a ministry, then let that ministry be able to take charge of startup issues. For instance, currently we have the Kenya National Kenya. Get the name. Kenya means Kenya Innovation Agency. Sorry. Yeah, so which sits under the Ministry of Education, but again, is talking about startups. We have again and a lot of interventions around NACOSTI and innovation, etc., which speaks to startups, but again is within a different ministry. So I think that is something that we might need to address as a country before we go to do negotiations, so that we are very clear in terms of what we expect. We are looking at SME, these are the challenges, we want market. So can we be able to maybe help us develop a special economic zone for this market? We have startups, these are the challenges. We want investors, etc. Can we be able to get support for that? So it's based on this, on our understanding of how we are trading with the US. What are the challenges that SMEs face? And that forms the basis of our interventions around the same. So what we try to do is look at the different issues, maybe for example, agriculture, and try to condense, of course, using this chart on all current government intervention within agriculture and identifying challenges within the space and using that as identifying a gap and using that as a basis for negotiation. So we've combined all interventions. So for example, under agriculture, we have Vision 2030, we have the different entities that have mentioned that. Under National Industrial Policy, which is under Ministry of Trade, again, we have a focus on agriculture in terms of focus on value addition. So what is happening is you'll see that this particular policy is only within industry for example, within Ministry of Industry and Trade. We've not even gone to Ministry of Agriculture to find policy interventions that focuses on agriculture. So what our approach is to condense policy, all government policy into one. So it's easier for you to be able to negotiate as full government for this specific sector. Again, if you look at digital trade, we have Vision 2030, which has a mention of the different aspects within digital trade. Again, it's a myriad. We have a JIRA program, we have media parks, we have digital villages, we have startups, we have Konza. There's so much under digital trade. So I think the conversation is, in terms of cost-benefit analysis, what should we go with? should we still go to negotiate saying we want to build Konza? Or should we go and say we want to ensure that, you know, startups in Kenya are able to access talent, they're able to access, financing, etc. So I think this is a trade-off that probably we need to have. And I think for us, our approach would be, we have really focused on infrastructure. You know, we've built out Konza. The different presidential candidates, for example, are talking about continuing infrastructure development in terms of fiber optic. Question is, if you have to look at physical infrastructure investment vis-a-vis, you know, softer investment in terms of policy, etc., which one would give the biggest benefit? We already know, for example, startups are raising quite a bit of money. The startup ecosystem is quite vibrant. Why can't we invest in that? And why can't we use this platform to be able to negotiate for our startups to be able to get a good deal? Again, in terms of regulatory practices, this is mentioned across different policy documents: Vision 2030, industrial policy, Msme Policy, etc. How can we be able to use you know, this platform to be able to allow Kenyan SMEs, Kenyan startups to be able to adopt good practices, and what kind of framework is required for them to be able to access market? So we can talk about regulation for the sake of maybe taxation, but you can talk about regulation to support for them to be able to access market. Then, you know, formalization and taxation becomes a byproduct of that. Focusing on SMEs, again, SMEs has the biggest in terms of government intervention. We have, you know, your ease of doing business. It's mentioned across ministries. So what we've tried to do again is just to condense that into one page and to allow us to be able to propose interventions. So for the purposes of this particular session, I did not mention all of them, all the 8, but just to give you a gist in terms of the approach that we wanted, and again use this as a platform now for us to be able to talk, you know, unpack some of the issues or some of the recommendations that you have around the rest of the issues. So of course, out of this, we already are working on a paper. We hope we can be able to incorporate both what we are seeing in terms of literature review, as well as you know, conversations with different actors to be able to enrich this document. Again, it's not that we are going to force the government to take the options, but at least it's just to give a different you know, policy or a different approach towards this particular conversation. So again, I would just maybe open this up for you know, for input. Probably whatever you think, you know, if our approach is okay, if it's not okay, are there areas that you think we need to improve, etc. Then probably we can just take it up from there. Anyone can go first, or do you want us to? Sheila? Sheila, you there? Maybe. Can I confirm if I'm being heard? Because I'm thinking like almost like I'm speaking to myself. Some can proceed.
Thank you, Victor. And I think that was quite insightful. I think I have several concerns, probably not concerns, but observations from what you presented. When we talk about agriculture, for example, the inputs from the US, I think the fourth was materials, the wheat and such things. I think one of the things that probably we may need to think about, even as we talk about agriculture, is the heavy subsidization that the US does for its agricultural sector, which actually gives its sector some competitive advantage against over the others. Are we as Kenya willing to go into a negotiation when we know we are not doing the same? Are we, because we are setting ourselves up for failure in some sense, because they subsidize them heavily. Ours here, we struggled against that. And now with the MC10, when the discussions are happening here, I think that was one of the stalemates that actually came up. We were not able to sign that Nairobi Declaration because of that heavy subsidization that they refused to remove. So I think that is something that I think a lot of discussion and thought needs to go through that. What are we willing to concede? And I think that would be a very significant, it would have a very significant impact on our agricultural sector. You know, wheat and maize and such very key crops. I think there's something else on agriculture that you mentioned, the suboptimal research in agriculture as a challenge. And I struggle with that and I challenge that in this sense. When you talk in the coffee industry, for example, we have the Coffee Research Institute in tea, we have the Tea Research Foundation. And when you talk to them globally, really, Kenya is regarded to have a very good standing in terms of research, production, in terms of the seeds, in terms of varieties. And one thing that I feel is a big challenge, may not really be about research, but it may be implementation, bringing this research down to uptake locally. We have, for example, in coffee, we developed Ruiru, one of the best varieties that is resistant to pests, and, but it has been taken up more in the region than here. Uganda, Rwanda, they have taken April 11 faster than we in Kenya. Why? What would be the issue? And I think that is where the issue is. It's how do we translate our research on ground? How do we make our farmers take it up and things like this? So we have good research, right? Talking about purple tea, for example, in a variety created in Kericho, the Tea Research Foundation. We have not taken it up so well, but the world is going towards this kind of teas, this kind of specialty teas. Why are we not encouraging our farmers more to take that up and to put them and to plant them? So I see that, I think, and that has been a big issue even when we have elections like this. It's implementation of government policy. We have good policy, but we don't implement. But now as we go and start negotiating something like this with a very big player, someone who is way advanced, do we really as a country have clear objectives, or are we clear on what we want to benefit from a partnership like this? And I feel probably that may be, I think that is a kind of conversation problem we may need to really push through a bit more. Yeah, so those are just some observations from your presentation and something that I've thought through as you made the presentation. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. And I think you've brought out an issue that maybe the uptake of research, again, just my initial thoughts around the same is correlated with the suboptimal extension services. Because I think the extension services is what should be able to allow farmers to be able to get up-to-date information in terms of, even myths. I was talking to someone within the agricultural space, I think 2 weeks ago, and they were talking about, the availability of a variety of rice that, requires less rain, doesn't have to be on a paddy field, is resistant. But again, the challenge was farmers were very skeptical. The same happens within the groundnuts or peanuts industry. If you look at what is produced in terms of peanuts vis-a-vis maybe peanut butter, our farmers are still stuck on the small variety, which is very sweet, but is not suitable for peanut butter. So what manufacturers or producers end up doing is importing the big peanut from Malawi and Tanzania, etc. So I completely agree with that, with those sentiments. And probably what we can do is try to incorporate some of the reactions towards the report that you're working on. And I think I must also mention is probably after this, probably you can just share your contacts, logos and stuff, because we intend to put out a report. And I think it would only make sense if we recognized the different contributors towards the report, on the report. So after this, probably you can just share contacts. And I'll probably also share the presentation for your own consumption and internalization.
Victor, I had a quick question. Can you hear me?
I can hear you very clearly.
Yeah. Just to go off what Sam was saying, obviously there's a disconnect between policy and implementation. And I'm wondering, as ecosystem builders, do you have any advice on how we can practically contribute to making sure that policy then actually is implemented? Because I feel like there's a lot of great things that are written on paper, but obviously there's that disconnect. Do you have any advice on how we can do that?
I think the whole idea around policy push and policy advocacy, remember, ultimately, the people who actually implement policy is government, and specifically government ministries. So sometimes we can either, number one is provide alternative policy positions. So currently, I'm sure even as Kenya goes towards these negotiations with the US, they already have maybe probably a team that is going to do the negotiations. They probably are doing something similar to this. So what we, at least at first level, is for us to be able to, as ecosystem players, give an alternative voice and give a practical alternative towards what is there. So I think that's that's our biggest arsenal or our biggest card that we have out there. But I don't think there's any private sector player who can say that there's a guarantee that the policy options that they give is actually going to be implemented. So I think our role basically stands at doing our homework, ensuring that we're able to give the solutions that we need, and present that to government through the different channels that are there. So if you notice, like whenever policy is being formulated, as well as legislation is being formulated, the best we can do is participate in those processes to ensure that some of the sentiments that you have is actually heard. The challenge that we have in the ecosystem, and I think I was mentioning this again to Sheila, is we refrain from engaging with government and participating in processes that affect us. So I think the sooner we start participating and engaging constructively, the better for us, that there is a chance or probability that some of the suggestions that are being put out there can be co-opted in terms of policy as well as legislation.
Thank you.
Victor, could
Yes.
I mention something? I think I like the question that was asked. And something I asked myself is, have we ever had a period in our history where we have implemented policy well? And maybe use an example of when what you're talking about extension services. I think it worked very well in the 80s. And why did it work well? I think there was a sense in which government was doing it, and it almost looked unlawful for you not to do what the extension services have told you. They would come and tell you your cows are not doing well because of this and this and this, and you have to implement. And they would come back and check. Have you done it? The local authorities, they would actually follow up to make sure that happened. And I think it worked so well at that time. What has changed? And I think those are the things that probably to help us, because what you explained is that in participating in giving your voice, that is part of policy formulation. Once it has been formulated and enacted, what happens next? How does government then come back to private sector and tell them, this is how we are implementing, and what is your role, what is our role? Because government is facilitating. The role of government is to facilitate. Once the legislation, once the policy is in place, it's to facilitate. How is it that the relationship between private sector and government is not as it should be? Because I think that is there where the issue is, and probably because we come from in the export sector. one of the interventions sometimes we will do an intervention, for example, and say, there is something happening in Congo, what happened in DRC the other day, and we call the private sector to participate. You will get very good participation coming through. And once that has come through, in following up to see what they have been able to achieve and what how government can support more, information does not come back to government. There is that sense of, nikikwambia, you may not, you may use this information against me, KRA will be on my neck, there will be other issues that will come, you see. I think there is that element again that in terms of implementation of government policy and facilitating, there's some sense of trust that will need to be built in a better way. So, yeah, so I think just a very simple example. I'm sure there are more complex examples, but that just came to mind in to respond to Nuba. Thank you, Victor.
Thank you very much, Sam. And this is, of course, policy and follow-up is always a complex issue. It's not a one fit all. And I think it's just the more we're able to engage and iterate, probably we can be able to get a solution of sorts. Because already I know we have different BMOs, as I mentioned. As I was starting, we know we have, your KEPSAs, we have your KNCCI, we have the, association around cereals. There are a lot of associations across board. So the question, and again, which is a challenge to us within the space, is how can we be able to organize for us to be able to actually achieve, actual implementation and have actual follow-ups to ensure that we're able to, make iterations and give feedback that would allow and allow government to be able to, to be able to answer on their failings. That I agree, but I think to some degree also some have worked. If you look at what is called the business amendment laws, so as and this is what was feeding the ease of doing business. So if government was very proactive in terms of engaging private sector, asking where the bottlenecks, changing laws, and ensure that maybe, for example, currently we have you can register your business online. So it's the act of being able to do your business registration and pay your taxes and stuff online is as a direct correlation to private sector effectively engaging with government and government being able to implement that, and we can be able to see that result. So whether that reflects across board, of course that's not happening, but I think it's an opportunity for us to do a reflection around the same and see how can private sector be organized to allow to see that kind of success in terms of actual support of business practically on the ground. But thank you again for that.
Victor, sorry. Yeah, in terms of digital economy, I don't know whether I missed it, but I didn't see anything on e-business, e-commerce. Because as an agency, we've been trying to leverage on technology for market access and tried even to get some SMEs to get to sell their products on Amazon, but there were a few challenges. And we've been trying to get to Amazon, but it's not that easy. So don't you think we should include aspects of e-commerce and e-business and the digital economy?
Yeah, so I think the way I structured it is I picked the interventions that are happening within the Ministry of ICT. And if I'm not wrong, there is the Ajira digital program. So what I'm trying to do is look at whatever government is doing intervention and see how we can be able to use the framework or agreement that is coming up to be able to support those existing programs. So I think the one that you mentioned under the agency, maybe I haven't been able to pick it up in a government or in a document of sorts. Maybe probably I can do a review, or you can just direct me there. Then probably we can just be able to have it as part of the compilation that we have, and asking how can we be able to help these programs to be able to access markets, as you mentioned, is a current challenge. So I don't know. I don't want to lock anyone out. Is there any reaction or any feedback? It's exactly 11:11. I don't want to. So if going once, going twice, going thrice. So anyway, probably just to give a vote of thanks again. Thank you very much, everyone, for sparing your precious time to be able to join these conversations. Again, I know the last 2-3 years we've had a lot of online meetings until we are coming to a point of burnout. But I thought, we thought this is an issue that probably needs discussion. If you're not on the table, you always invite yourself to the table. So I hope that this process of whatever we are doing will amount to something in terms of real practical output or policy position that can be able to assist whoever are going to negotiate in terms of arsenal or practical issues that should be considered. As I mentioned, we are working on a report around the same. If you still have any concrete recommendations that you have, I think we are very much open to receive that. Probably I can just share my email for any further feedback that you have. You can share your company profiles, etc. We can just include. We can include it in the final report. Again, just to recognize the contribution and show that we are united as an ecosystem in terms of concern for issues and being ready to give feedback. So asanteni sana and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you, Victor.